I never thought I'd be walking back into this house. Not after all that happened. The tension in the air was thicker than the scent of the old wood polish, and that faint hint of regret that seemed to cling to these walls. I clutched my husband's, no ex-husband's, father's invitation in one hand, and clung tightly to Robert's arm with the other. My husband, my soulmate, my ex-husband's brother. It sounds bad, doesn't it? It wasn't always like this. Once I was married to Michael. We had a life together, but it was nothing compared to the spark I felt with Robert. Michael was always so serious, focused on his work, on building our future. I admired that at first, but over time it felt like he was more in love with success than me. And then there was Robert, with his easy laugh and wicked sense of humor, always making me feel alive. It started out innocently enough. A shared joke at a family dinner, a lingering glance, and then one night, a kiss that changed everything. Robert and I tried to fight it at first, but passion has a way of destroying good intentions. So we left. We chose love, even if it meant pain for others. But now here we are, 4 years later, standing in Michael's living room, surrounded by his family. I knew what we did was wrong, but time has a way of dulling guilt. I'd convinced myself we deserved to be happy, and if that came at Michael's expense, so be it. People get over things. People move on. Michael's eyes met mine, cold and unreadable. He looked older than I remembered, and part of me expected him to yell, to curse, to throw us out. But he just stood there, calm as ever, arms crossed over his chest. "Welcome back," he said, voice flat. Robert grinned and clapped his hands. "Still single, bro? LOL. His laugh was loud and forced, the kind he used when he was trying to dominate a room. I felt a prickle of unease. This wasn't a good start. "Hey ugly, still the same?" I couldn't help the words that slipped out. I regretted them the moment I said them, but the habit of digging into Michael's pride was old and familiar. It was easier than facing him with honesty. The silence that followed was chilling, and I felt my pulse quicken as Michael's father, a towering man with an air of authority, stood up. "Good timing," he said, looking straight at Robert and me. "I have something important to tell you." Robert shifted uneasily beside me, and I could feel the change in the room. The smiles vanished. There was no more mockery. Just dread. "What is it?" Robert asked, his voice a touch too confident. He always hated looking weak in front of his father. I held my breath, watching Michael's face for clues, but he was as closed off as ever. "That's between me and my sons," his father said, eyes flicking between Robert and Michael. "I'll tell you in my study. Now." I felt a pang of fear, something old and buried rising to the surface. "Wait," I said, forcing a laugh. "You can't just take Robert away." "This isn't about you, Lauren," Michael said, cutting me off. "Stay here." Robert didn't look back as he followed his father and brother into the study, and I was left standing alone in the cold silence of a house that no longer felt like home. My heart pounded in my chest. What did Michael's father know? What was so important that it made Robert look pale as a ghost? I was about to find out. And deep down I knew that whatever it was going to change everything again. The door to the study closed behind Robert and Michael, and suddenly I felt alone in a house full of people. Michael's mother sat stiffly in her chair, her expression unreadable, but the tension in her shoulders told me she had nothing warm to say to me. The rest of the family barely acknowledged my presence, as if I were some unwelcome guest that had rudely wandered in off the street. The silence stretched on, heavy and unbearable. I shifted uncomfortably in place, glancing toward the study door, resisting the urge to press my ear against it like a paranoid fool. What was being said in there? Why had Robert gone pale at his father's words? I forced myself to sit on the couch, smoothing my dress over my knees. I wasn't going to let them see me rattled. If they wanted me to feel uncomfortable, well, I'd give them nothing. I had made my choices and I wasn't ashamed of them. Or at least that's what I told myself. A sudden voice cut through the silence. "You've got some nerve coming back here." I turned to see Michael's younger sister, Emily, standing by the fireplace with her arms crossed. Her eyes burned with the resentment she had never bothered to hide. I smiled thinly. "It's been 4 years, Emily. You'd think people would have moved on by now." She scoffed. "You don't get to act like what you did was just some harmless thing people should move on from. You tore this family apart." I bristled. "I fell in love. It happens. It happens." Emily's voice rose with disbelief. Lauren, you were married to my brother. You were part of this family. And you ran off with his own blood. Do you have any idea what that did to him? A flicker of guilt crawled up my spine, but I shoved it down. I had to defend myself. I had to stand my ground. I didn't mean for it to happen, I said. But Robert and I don't care about your excuses, she snapped. You ruined Michael. You don't know what it was like after you left. He shut down. He barely spoke for months. And then he changed. You didn't just leave him, Lauren. You shattered him. I swallowed hard. Had Michael really been that broken after I left? I had imagined he would be hurt, angry even, but I never thought it would linger. Before I could respond, the study door creaked open, and out stepped Michael and Robert, with their father right behind them. One look at Robert's face told me something was very, very wrong. His skin had gone ghostly pale. His lips slightly parted as if he had forgotten how to breathe. His hands hung at his sides, stiff and unmoving. I had never seen Robert look afraid before. Not like this. Robert. I stood immediately, taking a step toward him. What's wrong? He didn't answer. He barely even looked at me. Michael, however, did. And for the first time in years, there was something in his eyes that scared me. A calm, terrifying certainty. Michael's father exhaled, shaking his head. Sit down, Lauren. You're going to want to hear this too. My stomach twisted violently. I knew that whatever was coming next was about to rip my world apart. Robert wouldn't look at me. That was the first thing that sent my nerves spiraling. He had always been confident, cocky even, standing tall with that arrogant grin that made me fall for him in the first place. But now? He looked like a man who had just seen his entire world crumble beneath his feet. His face was pale, his lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line, and his fingers trembled at his sides. Michael, on the other hand, was composed. Too composed. There was a quiet, almost eerie satisfaction in his expression, like he had just been handed the exact weapon he needed to destroy us, and he was relishing the moment before striking. I felt cold all over. Michael's father cleared his throat, his gaze heavy as he stared at Robert and me. Sit down. I hesitated. I didn't want to. I wanted to grab Robert's hand and drag him out of this house, away from whatever was about to happen. But Robert didn't move, and neither did I. Michael's voice cut through the silence like a blade. 4 years, Robert. For years you've been playing house, thinking you got away with everything. Robert flinched just barely, but it was enough for me to see. Robert started, but Michael's father raised a hand, silencing him. There's no point denying it, he said. We know the truth. My pulse pounded in my ears. What truth? What could possibly have been said behind that door that would shake Robert like this? Michael turned to me then, his cold eyes locking onto mine. Lauren, tell me, in the past 4 years, did you ever stop to wonder why we never spoke? Why I never reached out, never tried to win you back? I stiffened, my spine straightening. Because you hated me, I said, my voice firm. Because I betrayed you. You didn't want me anymore. Michael chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. No, Lauren. That's not why. Something about his tone sent a shiver down my spine. Then why? He let the silence stretch, letting the tension coil so tight it was suffocating. Then he said it, the words that shattered everything. Because Robert was never meant to be the one who betrayed me. A chill ran down my arms. What? I looked at Robert, expecting him to scoff, to push back against whatever nonsense Michael was spewing. But he didn't. He stood there, silent, like a condemned man awaiting his sentence. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice cracking just slightly. Michael's father exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. Robert didn't steal you, Lauren. You were a distraction. A convenient one. I blinked. That's not true. We love each other. Michael's laugh was humorless. Oh, I have no doubt that you think that. But tell me, Lauren, do you know what Robert was doing before you ran away together? Do you know where he was spending his nights? I felt the ground beneath me tilt. What are you saying? I whispered. Michael's father answered for him. Robert was stealing from the family business. I felt the air leave my lungs. Millions, Lauren, Michael said, his voice dripping with venom. He embezzled millions from our company. I was getting close to figuring it out. And then like magic, he suddenly fell in love with my wife and ran off, knowing that would be enough to break me and keep me distracted. I shook my head. No, this couldn't be true. I turned to Robert, desperate for him to say something, anything, to make this lie disappear. But he still wouldn't look at me. His silence was louder than any confession. Oh my God! I breathed, stumbling back a step. Robert, tell me they're lying. Robert finally moved. His jaw clenched, his eyes darting to Michael, then to his father, then finally to me. But the guilt in his expression said everything before he even opened his mouth. His voice was hoarse. Lauren, Michael cut him off. How long were you planning to keep lying, Robert? You thought Dad wouldn't find out? You thought I wouldn't put it together eventually? Robert's breathing was unsteady now, his chest rising and falling rapidly. I was going to fix it. Michael's father scoffed. Fix it? You destroyed everything. And Lauren, he turned to me now, his voice softer but no less damning. I'm sorry to say, but you were never the grand love story you thought you were. You were his alibi. His cover. He used you. I felt something inside me crack. No, I whispered. My head was spinning. No, this couldn't be true. Robert took a step toward me. Lauren, listen. But I took a step back, my hands trembling. I had left everything for him. I had destroyed my marriage, lost my place in this family, lost my dignity for this? For a lie? Michael's voice came softer now, but it cut even deeper. That's why I never tried to get you back, Lauren. His eyes locked onto mine, and there was something almost pitying in them. Because you weren't the one who really betrayed me. Robert did. And you? You were just collateral damage. I opened my mouth but no sound came out. And Robert? He just stood there watching my world fall apart. I couldn't breathe. The walls of Michael's childhood home, the place I once thought of as family, seemed to close in around me. The voices, the tension, the sheer weight of what had just been revealed pressed down on my chest like a vice. Robert, my Robert, had used me. Not loved me. Not chosen me. Used me. I shook my head, my pulse thundering in my ears. This had to be some cruel, elaborate lie. Some twisted way for Michael to get revenge, to make me suffer the way I had made him suffer. That had to be it. I turned to Robert, desperate for him to snap out of whatever stunned trance he had fallen into, to fight for us. But all I saw was guilt. You. My voice was barely a whisper. Tell them they're lying. He swallowed hard. Michael scoffed, shaking his head. Go ahead, Robert. Tell her. Lie to her again. Because that's all you've been doing for the past 4 years, isn't it? Robert clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. I didn't. Didn't what? Michael pressed, stepping closer. Didn't steal millions from the company? Didn't run off with my wife at the perfect moment to keep me too broken to notice? Didn't frame it as some grand, fated love story to keep her blind? Robert stayed silent. I felt something crack deep inside me. My lips trembled as I whispered. Oh my God. It's true. Robert finally looked at me then, his brown eyes full of something I couldn't quite decipher. Regret? Shame? Or was it just another act? I felt sick. I had spent years convincing myself that love had been worth the price I paid. That my choices had been painful but necessary. That I had left behind a dull, lifeless marriage for something real, for passion. For someone who truly saw me. But now? Now I wasn't some tragic lover caught in a cruel twist of fate. I was a fool. A stupid, blind, used fool. I loved you. I breathed, my voice cracking. I left everything for you. Robert's expression twisted with something unreadable. Lauren, Michael's father exhaled heavily, rubbing his temples. Enough. There's no point in continuing this. He turned to Robert, his voice like steel. I've spoken with our lawyers. We have enough evidence to prove what you did. You're not walking away from this. Robert's breath hitched, his body going stiff. My stomach lurched. What does that mean? Michael finally looked at me, and for the first time since I walked through that door, I saw something different in his face. Pity. We're pressing charges, he said simply. The room went dead silent. The words hit me like a slap. Charges. My voice barely sounded like my own. Michael nodded. We have bank records, hidden transactions, proof of falsified documents. It's done, Lauren. Robert is going to prison. I turned to Robert, waiting for him to deny it, to fight back, to do something. But his face was pale, his eyes darting wildly as if his mind was racing through every possible escape. I knew that look. He was a man trapped. No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, 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 this isn't happening. But it was. Michael's father nodded at Robert. I suggest you get a lawyer. But either way, this is over. I grabbed Robert's arm, shaking him. Say something. Tell them this isn't happening. Tell them you didn't do this. He finally spoke, but his words weren't for me. His voice was hoarse, quiet. Dad, he said, looking at the man he had betrayed. Please, don't do this. Michael's father let out a bitter laugh. You destroyed this family and now you want mercy? Robert swallowed. I can fix it. Michael's voice was ice. Like hell you can. I barely noticed when the front door opened. I barely noticed the heavy steps, the shift in energy. I did notice the voice, though. Robert Carlyle? The police. 2 officers stepped into the room, their presence suffocating. We have a warrant for your arrest, one of them said. Robert froze. I stopped breathing. The next thing I knew, they were pulling him away from me, twisting his arms behind his back, the clinking sound of handcuffs filling the air. This isn't real. It couldn't be real. I stumbled back, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. Stop. You can't. This is a mistake. One of the officers barely spared me a glance. Ma'am, stay back. Robert struggled, turning toward his father, toward Michael, toward anyone who would give him a way out. Dad, please. Michael's father shook his head. Michael just watched. I felt something deep inside me shatter when I heard the words leave Robert's lips. Lauren, he gasped, voice desperate as they pushed him toward the door. Help me. But I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was watch as the man I thought I had risked everything for was dragged away in handcuffs, his last plea for help ringing in my ears. And for the first time in 4 years, I had no idea who I was without him. The front door slammed shut, taking Robert with it. The sound echoed in my ears, deafening, final. I stood frozen in place, staring at the empty space where he had just been. The man I left everything for, the man I sacrificed my marriage for, gone. Just like that. He hadn't fought back. He hadn't denied it. He hadn't even looked at me in those last few moments. Because there was nothing left to say. Lauren. Michael's voice snapped me out of my haze, and I turned to look at him. There was no anger left on his face, no smugness, no satisfaction. Just indifference. Like I was nothing. Like I had never been anything. And somehow that hurt more than anything else. I had spent the past 4 years convincing myself that I had made the right choice. That Robert and I had been meant to be. That even though I had hurt Michael, love had made it all worth it. But now, standing in a room full of people who despised me, abandoned by the man I had thrown everything away for, I wasn't so sure anymore. Michael's father let out a tired sigh, rubbing his temples. Well, that's done. Emily scoffed from across the room, arms still crossed over her chest. Good riddance. I flinched at her words. Michael's mother stood up, smoothing out her dress. She barely even spared me a glance as she walked toward the kitchen, as if I had ceased to exist. Excuse me, she muttered, disappearing down the hall. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. That's it. I asked, my voice small, hoarse. You're all just moving on? Michael arched a brow. What exactly did you think was going to happen, Lauren? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I mean, he continued, tilting his head slightly. Did you think we were going to break down in tears? Did you think anyone was going to feel sorry for you? He let out a dry laugh. Did you think I was going to? My hands clenched into fists. You left, he cut me off. You chose him, Lauren. You chose him over me, over my family, over everything. So now that he's gone, what? You expect us to take you back. A deep burning shame settled in my chest. I know, Michael took a slow step closer, his blue eyes locking onto mine. I used to know those eyes better than anyone. I used to be able to read every flicker of emotion in them. Now I saw nothing. There's no place for you here, he said, voice eerily calm. There hasn't been for a long time. Tears burned at the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not in front of any of them. Michael, I whispered. Don't, he said sharply. Don't say you're sorry. You're not sorry. You're just alone. I gasped softly, taking a step back. 'Cause he was right. I wasn't sorry for leaving him back then. I wasn't sorry when I told myself I had traded a cold, workaholic husband for a man who truly loved me. I wasn't sorry for any of it. But now I was alone. And for the first time in 4 years I had no idea where to go next. Michael didn't say another word as he walked past me, brushing against my shoulder. The rest of the family followed suit, leaving one by one until I was standing in the middle of an empty living room. Alone. Just as he said I would be. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at nothing, my mind refusing to process what had just happened. Robert was gone. Michael was gone. Michael's family, my former family, had walked away from me like I was a ghost. They didn't scream at me. They didn't curse me out. They didn't even argue. They just walked away. Like I was nothing. Because I was nothing to them now. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing myself to move. My heels clicked against the hardwood as I turned toward the door. The same door I had walked through earlier with my head high, standing next to him. Now I was walking out alone. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone in my purse. I dialed Robert's number before I could stop myself. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. A panicked breath left my lips as I pressed my phone to my ear, listening to his recorded voice, as if hearing him say anything would somehow make this all feel less real. Robert, call me. I whispered, voice trembling. Tell me what to do. Please. I ended the call, holding the phone in my hands like it held all the answers. But there was no answer. Because Robert wasn't going to fix this. Because there was nothing left to fix. I stumbled toward my car, fumbling with my keys. My hands were shaking too much, and the first time I tried to fit the key in the lock I missed. I squeezed my eyes shut. Breathe, Lauren, just breathe before trying again. This time the key slid in and I wrenched the door open. The second I was inside I collapsed against the steering wheel, gasping for air. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. I had spent years telling myself that I had chosen love. That Robert was the right choice. That what we had was worth the pain we caused. But now as I sat in my car shaking alone I had to face the truth. I had been played. Robert never really loved me. He had used me. And I had let him. A sob tore from my throat before I could stop it. For the first time since leaving Michael, I felt completely, utterly lost. Where was I supposed to go now? Who was I supposed to be? I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I had nowhere left to go. I don't remember how long I sat there. My fingers curled around the steering wheel like it was the only thing anchoring me to reality. My mind kept racing in circles, replaying everything from the past hour, from the past 4 years, but none of it felt real. Robert was gone. Michael's family had cut me off completely. And now I was alone. I forced myself to take a deep breath, gripping my phone like it held the answers. It didn't. I tried Robert again. Straight to voicemail. I tried his lawyer. No answer. Panic started to creep up my spine. This isn't happening. This isn't real. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling as I opened my banking app. I had money, we had money. Enough to get Robert out on bail. I could fix this. I just needed to. I froze. The balance was wrong. I blinked, refreshing the page, my pulse hammering in my ears. But the number didn't change. And that's when it hit me. The accounts were frozen. My stomach dropped. The money, our money, was locked. Robert had been embezzling for years. That meant all the money we had was tied to his crimes. Which meant I had nothing. A cold, paralyzing fear spread through my chest. I had given up everything for Robert. My marriage, my home, my reputation. I had abandoned the man who would have done anything for me. For someone who had been using me as a distraction while he stole from his own family. And now I had nothing to show for it. A strangled laugh bubbled up in my throat. How poetic. How perfectly fitting. I had spent so many years justifying my betrayal, convincing myself that love was worth the cost. That Michael had been too cold, too distant, too obsessed with work. That I had done the right thing in choosing Robert, in following my heart. But it was all a lie. I was never Robert's great love story. I was never special. I was just convenient. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. I needed to think. I needed to act. I pulled up the number of the only person who might still listen to me. The one person I never thought I'd have to call again. Michael. I stared at his name on the screen, my thumb hovering over the call button. Would he even answer? Would he care? After everything I had done to him, after 4 years of silence, after the way I had laughed in his face when I walked away from our marriage, what right did I have to ask him for help now? I took a shuddering breath, swallowing my pride, my shame, my fear, and pressed the call button. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, the call declined. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. Michael had just rejected me. And for the first time in my life, I realized there was no one left to save me. Michael had declined my call. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening, my mind racing. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. A sharp, hollow feeling spread through me. I had known, of course I had known, that calling him was a long shot. But some stupid, desperate part of me had still hoped he'd pick up. He didn't. He wouldn't. And why would he? I wasn't his problem anymore. I had made sure of that when I walked out of his life and into his brother's bed. My stomach churned, a bitter taste rising in my throat. I tried Michael's father next, my hands trembling as I pressed the call button. Voicemail. Emily. Voicemail. One by one, I went down the list, trying anyone, everyone in Michael's family, hoping for a sliver of mercy. Nothing. I was completely shut out. A shudder ran through me as the reality set in. I had no money, no home, no family, no one to turn to. And Robert wasn't coming back. I gritted my teeth, swallowing the sob that threatened to escape. I can't fall apart. Not now. I needed a plan. I opened my banking app again, staring at the frozen balance, hoping that if I refreshed the page just one more time, it would change. It didn't. Our apartment wasn't even in my name. Everything had been under Robert. If the company's lawyers were pressing charges, it wouldn't be long before the apartment was seized as evidence. That meant I had nowhere to go. A shaky breath left my lips as I tried to think. There had to be something, someone left. And then it hit me. My parents. I hadn't spoken to them in years. Not since they told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life by leaving Michael for Robert. My mother had cried, my father had yelled, and when I packed my bags, they told me that if I walked out of their lives for Robert, I shouldn't bother coming back. At the time I had scoffed. I thought they'd get over it, that they'd see what I saw, that they'd forgive me once they realized I was happy. But I had been so wrong. And now I was about to do the one thing I had sworn I never would. I was going to beg them for help. I pulled up my mother's number, my pulse pounding as I pressed the call button. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. And then, hello. I sucked in a sharp breath. She answered. Mom, I croaked, my voice barely above a whisper. A long silence stretched between us. Then finally, what do you want, Lauren? I clenched my eyes shut, my throat burning. This was it. My last chance. My last lifeline. And if she said no, I truly had nowhere left to go. Mom, I whispered, gripping the phone like a lifeline. Silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end, slow and measured, like she was deciding whether or not to hang up. I swallowed hard. Please just hear me out. A bitter laugh. Hear you out? After 4 years of silence. Guilt curled in my stomach. She wasn't wrong. I know I don't deserve it, I said quickly, my voice breaking. Things are bad, Mom. I need help. My throat closed up. I didn't even know how to say it. Another long pause. And then her voice, low and tired. What happened, Lauren? Tears stung my eyes. Robert's been arrested, I admitted. Everything, our money, our home, it's all gone. I have nothing. Another silence. And then she said the last thing I expected. Good. I gasped. What? You heard me, she said, her tone sharp. Good. You made your bed, Lauren. And now you get to lie in it. I sucked in a breath, my fingers tightening around the phone. Mom, please. No, she snapped, her voice firm. You left us. You threw away everything, your marriage, your family, your dignity, for a man who never cared about you. And now, when you finally see the consequences of your choices, you come crawling back. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I didn't know, I whispered. I didn't know it was all a lie. Mom let out a cold laugh. Of course you didn't. Because you didn't want to. I bit down on my lip, trying to stop the sob that threatened to escape. She was right. I hadn't wanted to know. I hadn't wanted to see the truth. Please, I whispered. I just need somewhere to stay. Just for a little while. Just until I figure things out. Mom exhaled heavily. Your father told you the day you left. If you walked away for that man, you'd be on your own. We meant it, Lauren. I felt my heart crack wide open. You're my mother. My voice broke on the last word. Yes, she said quietly. I was. But you stopped being my daughter the day you chose him over your family. I sucked in a shaky breath. So that's it? You're just going to let me be homeless? You're not homeless, Lauren, she said flatly. I'm sure one of Robert's rich friends will take you in. I let out a choked, humorless laugh. Robert doesn't have any friends. Not real ones. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you burned every bridge you ever had. I gritted my teeth. Mom, I'm begging you. A long-waited silence followed. And for just a second I let myself hope. Then, I hope you find your way, Lauren, she said, her voice quieter now. But you won't find it here. And then the line went dead. I stared at my phone, my breath coming in ragged gasps. That was it. My last chance. My last hope. Gone. I had never felt so empty. So alone. I dropped my phone onto the passenger seat, my hands shaking as I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. I had nothing. No money. No home. No one left who cared. And for the first time in my life I finally understood what rock bottom felt like. The silence in my car was suffocating. I stared at my phone, my mother's last words still ringing in my ears. You won't find it here. It was over. Any last shred of hope, any possible way out. I had just slammed the door on it with my own 2 hands. Tears burned my eyes, but I was too numb to cry. What was the point? There was no fixing this. No running from it. No way to rewrite the past. I had nothing left. No one left. The weight of that realization pressed down on me like a crushing force. I had spent the last 4 years believing I had made the right choice. That leaving Michael, leaving everything, had been worth it because Robert and I had been in love. But love hadn't saved me. Love hadn't stopped Robert from using me. It hadn't stopped him from stealing, from lying, from ruining everything we built. Love hadn't stopped Michael from moving on without me. And now? I was sitting in my car alone with nowhere to go and no one left to turn to. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. What now? The thought sent a chill through me. Where did someone like me go when there was nowhere left to go? I didn't even have an answer to that. A soft knock on the window made me jolt, my heart nearly leaping out of my chest. My head snapped up, my pulse pounding as I turned to see Michael. I froze. He stood outside my car, his expression unreadable, his hands in his pockets. For a long moment neither of us moved. Then finally I pressed the button to roll the window down, my breath shaky. Michael, I whispered. He studied me, his blue eyes cool, distant. Are you still here? I swallowed hard, my voice failing me. I didn't know what to say. Michael sighed, shaking his head. What do you want, Lauren? I flinched at how detached his voice sounded. There was no anger left. No resentment. Just indifference. And somehow that hurt more than if he had yelled at me. I opened my mouth, my throat dry. I don't know. Michael arched a brow. That's new. I felt my stomach twist. I deserved that. I deserved all of this. I tried calling my parents, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. They won't help me. Michael didn't look surprised. For a moment he just stood there watching me. Then he let out a slow breath, glancing away. So what now? I gripped the steering wheel, my fingers trembling. I didn't know. I had spent so long running toward what I thought was happiness, toward what I thought was love. But now that it was gone, I had no idea what was left. And maybe there wasn't anything left. Maybe this was it. The moment where I finally had to face what I had done. What I had lost. Michael shifted, rubbing his jaw before looking back at me. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. Do you need money? My breath hitched. He wasn't asking if I needed a place to stay. He wasn't offering comfort or forgiveness. He was just offering me a way to disappear. I stared at him, my throat tightening. Why would you do that? Michael exhaled, his expression tired. Because even after everything, I don't want to see you suffer. Tears welled in my eyes, my body shaking. He wasn't doing this because he cared. He was doing this because he pitied me. And that was when it truly hit me. Michael would never love me again. Not after what I had done. Not after the way I had destroyed us. And now? Now the only thing left between us was pity. I wanted to say no. To hold on to the last shred of pride I had left. But I had no pride anymore. Yes, I whispered. I need help. Michael nodded, already pulling out his wallet. He handed me a few $100 bills, his fingers barely brushing mine. It was the last time he would ever give me anything. And I knew that after this moment, he would walk away for good. So I took the money. I took it, knowing that this was the closest thing to mercy I would ever get. Michael stepped back, shoving his hands into his pockets. Goodbye, Lauren. My lips trembled, my fingers tightening around the money. I wanted to say something, anything to make him stay. But there was nothing left to say. So I watched as he turned and walked away, disappearing into the house, leaving me alone in the dark. For good.